Ladies and gentlemen, I know it's a long day, and this is the last panel before our reception, for which we will have buses. I will mention more details at the end of this panel. So I'll just kindly ask you to take your seats. And before this session, we are going to have one keynote address from Migrants' Contribution to Climate Adaptation and Resilience towards a New Paradigm. And to deliver this address, we're going to have Louise Baker, Managing Director from the Global Mechanisms of United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification, or known for many of you of UNCCD. So without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Louise, and then we will have the next panel. Louise?
Hello, everybody. Everybody had a coffee? Everybody still awake? Marvelous, fantastic. Hi, I'm Louise Baker, and it is an absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you so much, GFRID, for inviting us, and Pedro in particular. All protocols observed. I'm the Managing Director of UNCCD. So first thing, show of hands, please. Do you know who we are? Anybody? Oh, there's a few. This is exciting. This is good. Don't worry, it happens all the time. We're the sister convention to climate change and biodiversity. The forgotten baby sister, actually, as it happens. But we're very closely related, and I would argue critical for adaptation and resilience. Especially at that sort of, I'm going to say sweet spot, but it's not really sweet. At that point where, the most vulnerable point where nature and people meet. Our focus is on land and water, essence of life, and the challenges of adapting to a world where critical natural resources are already scarce and it's getting worse. To my mind, it's really the front line of climate change adaptation, especially here in Africa. It's not attributed, but there's a quote, a bit of wisdom I quite like. You can't go back and change the beginning, but you can start where you are and change the ending. And there's a lot I wish we could change about the beginning, about how we've been managing our land and water. Land degradation, the deterioration or loss of the productive capacity of soils, affects everybody. Bet most of us don't think about it. But it causes food insecurity, higher food prices, climate change, environmental hazards, and the loss of biodiversity and ecosystem services. In the worst cases, people just give up. The land is abandoned and the empty, ungoverned spaces are quickly filled with non-state actors. Globally, about 25% of the total land area has been degraded, badly degraded, and 24 billion tons of fertile soil is being lost each year. That's largely due to unsustainable agricultural practices, and it's affecting 3.2 billion people. And the challenge really is that it's the rural communities, smallholder farmers and the very poor who suffer the most. And there's clearly a strong correlation between climate change, environmental degradation, and migration trends. So land degradation is a driver of migration, and this is acknowledged in the Global Compact for Safe and Orderly Migration. So it's a rational choice for people to leave degraded, unproductive land and move to the next productive piece of earth, to the city or to further afield. So that's kind of where we are. It looks like quite a negative trend, but we can change the ending of this story if we change the narrative. Actually, if we turn the narrative on its head, because there's also a lot of good news and huge, huge potential. Firstly, we see where soil or land is restored, it can help build climate resilience, especially because it stores water. It can boost food security and incomes. It can also decrease out-migration and even promote increased in-migration to revitalize an area or a province. As degraded land is restored and land is opened up again, we have more choices and massive opportunities. To be clear, actually with a return on our investment, including for private sector investors. We went through an exercise of helping establish a public-private impact investment fund, and they're really seeing positive results in this first $300 million wave. It's impressive. In terms of scale, the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration puts nature at the very heart of this type of adaptation and resilience. 1 billion hectares have been pledged by governments worldwide for restoration, improvement. 400 million hectares under the UNCCD process. That's SDG 15.3 that we're trying to support. In Africa, this restoration process is taking the form of the Great Green Wall. It's a massive, African-led, multi-sector integrated development program. And at the One Planet Summit, $19 billion was pledged for implementation. The Great Green Wall is an interesting case. It links Europe and Africa around the two issues: resilience, land, and migration. It's in this context that the idea of the 3S initiative was born, with the view of boosting security, stability, and sustainability in Africa. It's grounded on the idea that no one should be forced to abandon their home because of land degradation and drought. And that by restoring the land, by building resilience, we offer communities the chance to stay, to invest, and to bring their lands back to life. Because well-managed land is a buffer against soaring temperatures, drought, and flood. Incentives, such as secure tenure, it's a really important piece. Practical skills and infrastructure development in rural areas all make staying a viable option. But despite our best efforts, many dryland areas are and will become unlivable. Environmentally induced forced migration will increase, and migration can, of course, be a great adaptation strategy. Just as a side note, we're finally seeing more adaptation finance, which I think is an important point. And I think we're at a point now where we can choose to leverage these trends. For example, rates of drought and desertification in southern Europe are worryingly high. The region doesn't have the skills and talents honed over many years in the dryland areas of Africa. Migrants from Africa are doing fantastic work in Spain and in Italy because they possess a unique resilience and adaptive capacity that can greatly benefit the communities they join. It's a wonderful quote from Lyndon B. Johnson, the former US president, who said, "The land flourished because it was fed from so many sources, because it was nourished by so many cultures, traditions, and peoples." First and foremost, migrants bring with them a wealth of traditional knowledge in this sector and practical experience from their homelands. It's things like Zai or drip irrigation. It's a net gain for everybody. We have a hugely satisfying project going on at the moment, a real partnership between Israel's desert tech and entrepreneurs, migrants, and creators from across the Great Green Wall, developing tech businesses that can survive in the Sahel or the Negev. This knowledge exchange is fueling transformational change, building resilient communities, and that can work anywhere. Along with knowledge, migrants are often highly motivated individuals seeking new opportunities to rebuild their lives and the lives of communities they left behind. So they're resourceful and they're investing. We don't make that very easy for them though, do we? Remittances and diaspora investments could facilitate the scale-up and adoption of climate resilient solutions if we get this right. But we're only really starting to see a shift away from direct consumption to more productive nature, climate-smart investments. I think COVID and the financial crisis have a lot to do with that. But we haven't cracked the question of what's needed to incentivize this shift so that we can go further and faster and build genuine resilience. A couple of considerations. Technology, products and financial services that help rural families better respond to manage their exposure to climate risks. Desertification will help. It can be digital applications, including blockchain, if I finally ever understand it, or analytics to help forecast, prepare for, and analyze climate risks. We have to focus on young people. We have to maximize youth employment. There really is a mismatch between the supply of green skills and the emerging demands for climate-smart, resilient economy. Training young people and linking in with sources of financing, especially from the diaspora, so they can get their incredibly creative solutions off the ground is a great place to start. There is enormous appetite for startups or to expand existing agribusinesses, and with their skills and resources, migrant and diaspora investors are perfect mentors. They can incubate and accelerate this movement. Financial service providers, and I really am going to underline governments here, have a transformational role to play too. Reducing costs, we've heard a lot. Building transparency and trust is critical. Nurturing innovation and financial inclusion. We have quite some experience with impact and patient capital, and it's my firm belief that with the right incentives and market signals, for us we're looking at tenure, matching and de-risking, migrant and diaspora investment could act in much the same way as the other private sector flows. There isn't a single silver bullet, we know that, but as a final point, as I said, we're finally seeing climate change adaptation finance coming into its own. To my mind, we absolutely recognize that diaspora and remittance financing, it's not our money, but if we could bring together that adaptation finance and that remittance and diaspora finance, imagine the impact we could have, particularly in Africa, of linking those two flows. By systematically breaking down barriers for investment and getting the right mix of innovation and support infrastructure in place, especially in rural areas, we can harness the transformative power of migrants in our collective fight against land degradation, climate change, and drought. Thank you so much.